We are live on Yonkers Voice, and today our guest is Diane Sare. Thank you, Diane. Thank you for taking the time and coming all the way down to our beautiful city of Yonkers.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Diane, we have 2 weeks, basically, for the midterms.
Right.
And you are running for United States Senator. Tell us why.
Well, the reason I chose to run actually was a couple of years ago. I announced quite early because I think the United States is in a terrible crisis, primarily an economic crisis, which is being used to manipulate and divide people. And Senator Schumer represents the interest of Wall Street and the City of London, not the interest of the average American. Also because I was a collaborator of a brilliant economist and statesman, LaRouche, for many years. He provided a lot of leadership in his presidential campaigns without having been elected, but nonetheless meeting with heads of state, meeting with people in and around the presidency, negotiating for Ronald Reagan with the Soviet Union on the laser defense against nuclear missiles. And my concern is the lack of leadership in the United States that actually cares to uphold the principle of the general welfare as expressed in our Constitution.
Now, Diane, before we go much into the politics of it, tell the people who are watching, who is Diane Sare? The background, what makes you, you? Why should I trust you? And said, she understands my problems. Are you one of us? Or
Sure.
are you one of those on top that pretend to know what our problems are? Tell us a little bit about you. Who
Sure.
are you?
Sure. Well, I am a political organizer for 33 years, as I said, with LaRouche and organizations associated with him. I am a trained classical musician. I was raised in a New England Quaker household, and that, I think, is what caused me to feel like I had to do something about the world. And when I heard Mr. LaRouche speak right before he was sent to prison, which I thought was a bonus because all of the Quaker journals I had read when they were fighting to abolish slavery, they were going to jail all the time. So I actually thought if someone was going to jail, that maybe they were a very good person. I guess that wasn't the common view.
That's a good way to see things.
Yeah, I would say so. So, and then LaRouche spoke, and there were greetings from Senegal, from Chile, from all over the world. And suddenly, you know, it will sound obvious to you, but here I was, this little American who'd grown up in a little town in Maine, that the poverty and the suffering of people was not because of a drought, not because of some natural disaster, but because of policies that came from the United States, from the International Monetary Fund, from the World Bank, and that I, as an American, felt morally obligated to do something about this because a baby in Malawi who was starving to death did not have the power to address it.
Are you making a connection between music and politics? Is the harmony of music the secret for the harmony of politics?
I think so. I think absolutely. I think it's been a terrible crime that music has been taken out of our public schools because when you learn an instrument or you learn to sing, what you discover in this process is that the diversity actually creates a whole which is greater than the sum of its parts. And also I can say that the skill required to play an instrument, the connection between the mind and your fingers or your breath or whatever else you're doing, it actually really develops a intellectual sharpness, which is why Einstein played the violin, for example. They're very related. I don't think any child should be robbed of an opportunity to study music.
Now, before we go any further, Diane, let me give a shout out to our restaurant, the restaurant that we always do our interviews from, so I have to give them a shout out. Dos Marias, located at 200 New Main Street in Yonkers, New York. This is the place where you can get the best Mexican food, where you can get to making new friends, Taco Tuesdays every Tuesday, karaoke from Wednesday to Sunday. So we always say sponsor, support, help our local businesses. But we need more than just words. Okay, we hear that all the time. We need to support this, we need to support that. But very often, those are nothing but words. We need to put actions to it. Come on down. They open every day from 12 or 1 o'clock until 1, 2, 3 in the morning. Taco Tuesdays on Tuesdays, and karaoke from Wednesday to Sunday. Come on down. This is not just the best restaurant, Mexican restaurant in Yonkers. I would say Westchester County, New York State, United States, and God knows, a few other countries. So come on down and check it out.
All right, now I know what I'm having for lunch after this interview.
You should.
I'm going to. I love tacos.
Awesome.
Oh, great. Okay.
Food is awesome. I speak with lots of people on the streets, and people have concerns, okay, about the future. What's coming? Is an inflation coming, or is it here already? I never heard about the musical connection. That's a new one, okay? And I want people to understand exactly what you mean. Because most people speak and they say that the problem is the economy. The problem is the migrants coming to the United States. The problem is a possible war that is happening. There is a war going on now, and that war can expand. Many are afraid that the United States will get involved in another war. I think those are the biggest problems that are affecting our nation right now. What do you feel?
Well, you bring up music, and I think that music, you know, I think it's in one of the Shakespeare plays, isn't it? The man that hath not music in his soul is fit for stratagems and something or other. I forget which drama it is. But clearly, if people had a sense of universal principles and universal love of mankind, we would not see some of the policies that are unfolding today. I do want to add there is right now a very great danger, which has been warned about by the Russian defense minister and the Russian ambassador to the UN, which is that the Ukrainians and the British are preparing to detonate a dirty bomb, a nuclear bomb, filled with nuclear waste, which will send radiation everywhere, and they're going to blame it on Russia. And Russia is at the UN demanding that inspectors go to the site where they say this is being prepared, and so far the inspectors haven't gone there. So I wanted to get that out because I think it is a very real danger. Maybe we can preempt it by announcing that it's a possibility.
It's a possibility, you know, and things don't seem to be getting any better. I remember when the issue began, people thought that in a month tops, a couple of weeks, and it would be over. It's approaching a year, right?
Yes.
It's approaching a year, and a solution does not appear to be in the horizon.
Well, I think there is a solution, because Ukraine doesn't do anything unless the State Department, British intelligence, and NATO tell them what to do. And you may know that back in April, Turkey was negotiating between Russia and Ukraine, and the Ukrainians were about to agree that Ukraine would not join NATO and would be neutral. And then Boris Johnson hopped on his plane, flew to Ukraine, and said, don't negotiate. Don't negotiate. We'll send you more weapons. We'll send you more weapons. Because the goal is what Biden said, unfortunately, in Poland, which is we want to destroy Russia. So we're going to use the Ukrainian people. We're going to slaughter them all. Who cares? It's like Afghanistan. We're running a proxy war to overthrow Putin or destroy Russia. And this is insane. No Americans don't think it's our business to run around destroying nations. We have plenty of work we need to do here in this country, plenty of poverty, a very difficult situation with drug overdoses and all kinds of things. Why is it our business to run around destroying other nations that aren't attacking us?
I understand that. I have heard that from many. But in 1947, it was a very powerful statement that said never again. And it's happening again. Don't you think that the world has an obligation to step in and protect the others and not allow any country to take over another by power?
Well, I do, and that's why the United States should not have overthrown the government of Ukraine in 2014 and brought in a regime. If we're going to talk about never again, we brought in a regime that revived the Nazi collaborator Stepan Bandera as a national hero. So we revived, and when it came up in the United Nations for a vote to condemn the glorification of Nazism, the United States voted against that. So I wholeheartedly agree, but it is what we put in power in Ukraine, which was literally burning people alive for speaking Russian, banning the Russian language, and then shelling people in the Donbass for 8 years, killing 14,000 people. And Putin kept raising this and raising this and raising this. The Minsk Accords, if we didn't want the war, the United States should have supported the Minsk Accords. But we didn't support the Minsk Accords. We didn't say stop firing on civilians in the Donbass. We said we'll arm the Nazi Azov battalion, the guys with the swastika tattoos. That's what we did. So, and Putin said, look, I mean, here we are, the anniversary of the Cuba Missiles Crisis. Kennedy risked nuclear war in order to not have the Soviet Union placing nuclear warheads in Cuba. So when Putin said, I can't have a nuclear-armed NATO country on my border, did we say, you know, that makes sense, we understand that?
We did not want one in our border either.
Right. But we didn't say that. We said, oh, no, Ukraine is open to anyone. And I just learned from a podcast, the Columbia University professor Jeffrey Sachs reported that he actually called the White House last December when he heard Putin was making these urgent, look, I need a treaty, I need security, I need to know this isn't going to happen. Jeffrey Sachs called the White House and said, look, you have to hear what Putin is saying. He's asking for a written agreement that NATO is not going to expand farther. And he reported, the White House told me, no, Ukraine can do what they want. NATO is open to all. So the truth, contrary to what is accepted in the mainstream media, is that it was not an unprovoked invasion.
So in other words, we are dealing with a beast that we created.
Correct. And we're about to create another one. I'm sure your listeners are following if we go through with this military intervention in Haiti, which would be a complete disaster. They don't want us for absolutely legitimate reasons. You know, the Drug Enforcement Agency should stop running drugs. Maybe that would help Haiti.
What do you mean?
I mean, in 2015, there were whistleblowers from the Drug Enforcement Agency who said Haiti, the DEA, is colluding with the drug gangs to protect the drug trade. And people can look this up. Obviously, there's good people in the DEA. That's why you had whistleblowers. But if that's the policy, so if we want to take this nation and use it to be a transshipment point for drugs to the United States, there is no hope for the people there, and there is a legitimate reason to not trust us.
Didn't we have a similar problem when we had the controversy drugs for arms, where the
Yes.
CIA was actually involved in bringing these so they can take that?
Yes.
It's nothing new.
No, and it's interesting you bring this up because that was one of the big things that happened to LaRouche. In 1987, he was told, probably by the Bush people and Ollie North, look, you're running for president, we'll make you a major candidate, just support the Iran-Contra operation. And he said, no way, you're running drugs for guns, no. And then the witch hunt evolved.
You stood side by side with Lyndon LaRouche. What do you remember of him? What was the thing that impacted you the most about that man?
You know, it's very funny, and I was lucky because LaRouche and I both came from very similar backgrounds. And my grandfather wrote a whole storybook about growing up in Beebe River, New Hampshire. LaRouche was born in Rochester, New Hampshire, and grew up in Lynn, Massachusetts, where his father ran a shoe factory. And then the Quaker experience, very similar. But the thing that I remember about LaRouche was his unbelievable compassion for mankind. He treated everybody equally. It didn't matter if you were the head of state or some homeless person. And in fact, when he was in prison, he always was very outspoken about the quote-unquote counterculture, rock music, drugs, sex, really hated it. But there was a rock band in the prison that was really rough guys, and they couldn't get a practice room. So Mr. LaRouche somehow, he was always organizing, he somehow got the prison authorities to get a practice room for this rock band, and they made him an honorary member of the rock band. And there's a picture, actually, it used to be on the wall in Virginia of him with these really huge guys with beards and tattoos, and he's standing there. So that's sort of how he was.
Now, Diane, there is a debate coming up between Pinion, Senator Schumer, and you want to be on that debate.
Correct.
You have about, what, 66,000
signatures.
What is the issue? Have you contacted them? Have you made yourself known that you want to participate, that there is people that want you there, and they want to hear you challenge what they have to be? You feel that you are a new beginner, okay? The change. And people in the United States are looking for that change. They're kind of tired of that old same stuff. What sets you apart from them, and what is the challenge why you are not going to be on that debate as of now?
Well, first of all, they have no intention of addressing anything about Russia and Ukraine, or even the hyperinflation, because of course Schumer has supported every single bailout, and he supported the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act. So they're not going to talk about these things. If I'm present, these things will be addressed, because they must be. And I'll say something, it's not only the debate, because the law was changed in the state of New York to eliminate minority voices. So in the 2019-2020 budget, legislation was sneaked in, as they typically do, to triple the petitioning requirements. And this was really a dirty thing for the Libertarian and the Green parties, because they had both achieved ballot status, which previously was if you get 50,000 votes or more in a gubernatorial or presidential race, your party, then you get a party line and you don't have to petition. You can have a nominating convention like the Democratic or Republican Party. So in 2018, the Libertarian Party and the Green Party qualified for ballot status, and then it's yanked out from under them And they say, oh no, sorry, you needed to get 130,000 votes. And they each had about over 100,000. So I think they moved it just to be that they wouldn't qualify. And if you want to get on the ballot, instead of 15,000 signatures in a statewide race, 45,000 signatures in a statewide race. And I had a friend of mine call the Board of Elections, and because I was preparing, because I knew 15,000 signatures was already very difficult. People might remember years ago John McCain didn't succeed at getting on the ballot. So I was trying to gear up my volunteers and get ready for 15,000. My friend said, Diane, I think you better forget it. It's 45,000. And I said, no, that's impossible. I didn't believe him. So I had another friend call the Board of Elections, and she said, no, it is 45,000. They gave me the link, and you can go in Albany to the albany.gov or whatever it is website. You can look in the budget, and you can see the original requirements in green, crossed out, the new requirements in red. And so we kind of regrouped. Are you going to do this? Do you really? And I said, yeah, I think we're on the brink of possibly nuclear war. My voice is needed. We're going to do this. And we did a real drive. We recruited 200 volunteers. I didn't pay any, I didn't hire a petitioning agency. And I told people, this is impossible. What we're about to do is impossible. It's 6 weeks, 45,000, which means you have to get 60, 70,000 signatures. Therefore, you're not going to clock in and clock out. You're going to be doing 12-hour days. We're going to be doing this 7 days a week. We can't have a day where we come in short, whether it rains, snows, whatever. And the people were dedicated enough that we filed 66,000 signatures. And very beautifully done, I have to say. When I looked at some of the other filings, that's another story about what the Republican Party did with the Independence Party. But at any rate, so that was the first hurdle. And according to the state, why did they want you to get 45,000 signatures? To prove that you are a quote-unquote viable candidate. So by the state standards, I demonstrated that I am not only a viable candidate, that I am the only person in the state that was capable of doing this. Everyone else failed.
Okay, Diana, let me just take this opportunity to make it clear so people who are watching us understand. Diane Sare is running as an independent. She's the voice for those that are on the independent line, so people understand exactly what is your political position.
Right, and there is no independent line exactly. You have to make up a body.
Okay.
You have to declare an independent body and give it a name. There used to be something called the Independence Party, which confused people because it was actually a party. It wasn't independent. So, but
so,
yeah.
Since we have to move on
yes.
different subjects, we don't want to stay too long in one.
No, but could I just say, because
yes,
you asked about the debate, and I wanted to say, so here I got the 66,000 signatures, and then they, Spectrum News announces a debate Sunday, October 30th. I am, by definition, a viable, serious candidate. And they say, oh, no, you're not included, only Schumer and Pinion, because you have to demonstrate that you're getting 15% in the polls. And then we say, well, what are the polls? And we get the 4 polls, and we discover that no one is allowed to say my name. My name is not in the polls. So it's completely rigged.
So how can you be in the polls?
Well, right. How could I have 15% when no one is allowed to choose that as an option? So we're still fighting it. I'm very determined that I'm going to get into the debate.
When is the debate supposed to be?
This Sunday.
So let's hope.
Yeah.
If you are elected, let's say you got it. You became United States Senator. You have a priority list of things that you want to address immediately that you feel it's important, needs to be addressed. Give me the first top 3.
We have to put the financial system through bankruptcy. So I would end the bailouts. We are bailing out billionaire perverts, forgive me for saying this, who have not worked a day in their life except to rip people off, stop. During COVID, we sent $4 trillion to the Federal Reserve. We didn't build public health. We didn't build sanitation. We didn't put people to work. It was a terrible waste, which frankly divided people and caused hyperinflation. So no more bailouts. Reinstate the Glass-Steagall bank separation of Franklin Roosevelt, so the investment houses do not get to use your savings account to gamble. And then we need a crash program of building infrastructure. My estimate is the U.S. needs about 43,000 miles of high-speed rail. We need modern sewage systems. I went to Woodside, where those people drowned after Ida. And what I learned is that in 1976, there had been a study done in Woodside that this community needed a dedicated sewer line for 50,000 people. That's what they had then, 50,000 people. The sewer line was never built. They now have 150,000 people. So when it rains, lo and behold, they die in their basements. That's not climate change. That's a cynical policy where you don't invest in the infrastructure you need. And I have my favorite project in the world is actually the Outer Harbor Gateway, which would be a 5-mile storm surge barrier from Sandy Hook in New Jersey to the Rockaways. And it was proposed by the American Society of Civil Engineers in 2009, before Sandy. Had it been built, it would have stopped 95% of the flooding. And it would also have a 6-lane highway or rail tunnel. So you could go from New Jersey directly to Long Island without the traffic snarls in Manhattan. We should build things like that. And how many people would it employ? And then what would happen in the schools? Could you afford to let your children sit in squalor with windows that don't open and toilets that don't flush in the public schools? You'd say, no, we have to create a skilled workforce that's going to build the infrastructure that our nation needs. So those are the priorities: the economy, the economy, the economy.
Now, I know that you voted for Donald Trump.
Correct.
In the last election. He hasn't said, but the indications is that he is intending to run on 2024. Will you support him again? Yes, no, and why?
I don't know. I can't answer that because I don't know who else will be running. I don't know what his platform will be. I appreciate that he finally, in my opinion, quite belatedly came out and said there should be a negotiated end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. That's a useful thing for him to do with all these followers. But I really cannot answer that question.
So, Senator, let me ask you this in a different way. You as a senator or a business owner of a large company, somebody applies for the job, for the position in the State Department, FBI or anything else. Normally a background check is done. If they were to get an application form for somebody who's been investigated as often as Donald Trump has been, and all types of investigation, criminal investigation, financial investigations, bank fraud investigation, would you still hire that person that has the background like the prior president had, and one that might run again? Would you trust that person?
Well, first of all, I have to say I don't have a very favorable view of the FBI. I saw what happened to Lyndon LaRouche, who was in litigation after litigation. I think our nation has to get back to the business of innocent until proven guilty. I don't think we should have trial by press. And to be fair, I don't appreciate what was done to Cuomo. I happen to not agree with him on many things, but I don't think it's the business of Letitia James or anyone else to say he should never run for office again.
And I don't think it's the business of the FBI to say, or Liz Cheney, to say Donald Trump should never run for office again. I think that's the business of the voters. The voters should have the, and that's why it's so outrageous to exclude candidates from debates. The voters should have the opportunity to be heard and hear how the candidate responds.
Hold Schumer accountable. What is your biggest opposition in regards to Mr. Schumer? Accountable for what?
Well, it's a couple of things. One, he is very hostile toward Russia and China. He introduced a frankly racist bill called the Innovation and Something Act, which is just all against China, basically presuming that every Chinese student is a spy. And I mean, it's really not very helpful. I think we need to have good relations with China and good relations with Russia if we want to stabilize the planet. He is voted for every single military aid package for every war, going back to the invasion of Iraq on the lie of weapons of mass destruction. So I think this is terrible. The other thing that I totally oppose that he is doing is his Marijuana Freedom and Opportunity Act, which is not, Schumer tries to pretend that this is about decriminalization and that it's to help the poor black and brown people who got put in jail for the war, the so-called war on drugs. It is not that. It is an income looting scheme to get people addicted, just like Big Pharma did with the opioids. And they want to have dispensaries which are going to destroy the neighborhoods of the people they're claiming to help. And what they market in these dispensaries are, you know, gummy bears that are 99% THC. In the state of New York, just so people know, we've only had legalization for 1 year, and there are still 900 dispensaries that applications have been accepted. They haven't opened yet. The number of children going to the emergency room because of pot-related incidents has increased 6-fold in 1 year. So this, I think, is a total fraud. It's a sham. None of what he says about it is true. And I think, happily, it probably isn't going to pass, but the very idea of pushing it, I think, is criminal.
Here in Yonkers, New York State, bail reform is a problem. Personally, I do think that we need the bail reform. We need it. There was no way that I could understand that a person who stole a bread is incarcerated for 6-8 a year waiting for trial, and the rich man that might be living somewhere in Scarsdale or whatever other place can post bail for killing somebody and is out in a month or in an hour or 2 hours. Because now, the way bail reform was done, that's the problem to me. What do you see that the problem is?
Good.
You are totally against bail reform, or are you against the way bail reform was done?
Well, first of all, to be very clear to your listeners, this is not an issue that a U.S. Senator would be dealing with. This is a state issue in Albany. But I do have strong opinions on the matter, given my experience with the criminal justice system as a LaRouche organizer. And I agree that there had to be reform because it's not fair that the people with the money don't go to prison. Somehow, the problem is the entire system of justice is a disaster. I have a friend who worked very hard to help me get on the ballot. He was convicted of some kind of money laundering because he was paying people under the table or illegal immigrants or something like that. So he's going to jail for 4 years. Didn't commit a violent crime, probably thought he was just trying to help people. He's out of here. A guy who assaults someone, robs a store, whatever, they go in and they're out in 20 minutes. So in a way, you have to ask yourself, what was the intent? Did they just intend to drive us all crazy by putting violent criminals back on the street? And, you know, it's obviously, are we that stupid?
I'm not sure. I really am kind of speechless by the way this is working.
Well, I ask you some certain questions. I fully understand that there is certain things that are not in the scope of United States Senator to deal with. But at the end of the day, you are an American.
Right.
At the end of the day, bail reform can affect you because none of us are exempt from being...
Because Schumer is going to put me in jail if I do a good job.
So, look, we could be talking about a whole bunch of other issues, but at some point we have to conclude. But I don't want to conclude without giving you an opportunity to look at our audience and tell them, look, I am the best option, and this is why I feel that I am the best option, so vote for me. But at the same time, let me tell my audience that Yonkers Voice does not endorse or oppose any candidate. Every single candidate is welcome on our platform, so they can talk to you, because at the end of the day, you make that decision. At the end of the day, you are the judge, and you are the one that's going to decide, yes, this is the best person, not that person. So we give you an option to connect with them through this interview. We are live. Things that in the past you did not have, you didn't have the opportunity to ask questions, engage with them. You saw them in the newspapers, on television, but you couldn't engage. Now you can. So this is the time to connect. We build that bridge between you and the candidate so you can ask your questions the way you see it, and they will give you a direct answer to your question. So please,
Great.
take a look
Well,
at
first, I will thank you. I want to thank you for doing this. You're much more fair than Spectrum News thus far. And now let me say to the voters, really, I have to tell you it's no contest. I'm sorry, but Schumer and Pinion are just a very low bar. I was on the radio with Pinion and discovered that his policy toward Russia and Ukraine, maybe he wouldn't send the money to this Nazi-infested Ukrainian regime, but he went on a crazy rant about all the things that Russia supposedly blew up in the U.S., like the Colonial Pipeline and this and that. He wouldn't actually be a change. I'm sorry. There's no difference. My commitment is to the principles in the Constitution, and most importantly, number one, is the general welfare, because there is no need to have a government if the standard of living of the population is not improved as a result of the policies of that government. And that's what it says in our Declaration of Independence, that if the government becomes abusive of this intent, that it's the duty of the citizens to alter or abolish it. I don't think we need a revolution. I think we need to uphold the electoral process. I'm very pleased that what some of my volunteers did the other night with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the question of nuclear war, which went viral, seems to have now led to a letter signed by 30 Democratic congressmen, including her, and Congressman Bowman, to Biden, that you should stop the war and there needs to be negotiations. So I also want to tell the American people, it's not hopeless. We can still make ourselves heard. We can still get through to our elected officials and demand a change. But what I would fight for is peace worldwide, not peace of getting rid of all principles, but a principled arrangement among major powers to stabilize the world, a new monetary system, not based on speculation, but based on physical production, and a crash program to rebuild the infrastructure in the United States from top to bottom and eradicate poverty, and that distinguishes me completely from the other candidates.
On that note, guys, we conclude our today's interview, but stay tuned. We have another interview following up. Majority Leader Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousin is going to be in the House, and she's going to be talking to us. She's going to be talking to us and explaining why she needs another shot, why she should be reelected to the position that she currently has. Thank you for watching. Until next time. And don't forget, guys, in the mood for Mexican food, Dos Marias, 200 New Main Street in Yonkers, New York, is the place to go. Best Mexican food around, not just in Yonkers, Westchester County, New York State. Also awesome drinks. And this is where the people come to have a good time. And if you have room for another friend, this is the place to make it. Thank you. Until next time.